Service to Allah is struggle. And if you're not struggling in the spiritual warfare, you are not a Muslim. And so that is where this is located, see. And this in Christian mythology, liberation theology is locked right there. Armageddon, the apocalyptic fantasies of the religious right are locked right here. And so there is this struggle. Now notice this could, when you don't know about this stuff, you can be husband and wife here, and then you can have always Armageddon between you. And you know, there used to be a lot of so-called marital therapists that would play lest you and him fight. You two are not, what's wrong with you is you two are not fighting enough. You know? They ought to be sued for malpractice, in my view. Because if a couple is locked into this, more fighting doesn't help. All you get is a Götterdämmerung, where the god and the goddess make magnificent, majestic warfare. You know, like World War II battleships with their 16-inch guns going this way. See, but anyway, the important thing to realize is that this is the space of combat with evil in the psyche. Yes.
What does happen to warriors like that?
Well, you got to help them understand that their warrior self is real fine and dandy and good, but it exists to destroy. And that they have to learn to participate in some of these other spaces. And what I do in my work with couples is I immediately come here. And I said, hey, you two, we need to help you find the garden because you have lost it. And you show me a couple with a lot of marital problems, I'll show you a couple that has lost the garden. Yes.
The film that shows magnificent warfare between the king and the queen, I never seen anything like it, is Dangerous Liaison.
Yes.
It's phenomenal film.
Yes, yes. Well, that thing is that's got a lot of wonderful archetypal modes. But now we got to move on. Remember where we are here. I'm gonna deepen this now. We've got to get into this space more deeply. You ready? You're located here? Okay, here we go. Stay there, because this is an elaboration of that space. This is the combat myth. Let me give you a reference for you that love getting into serious mythological and historical research. There's a new book out with Princeton University Press by a man by the name of Forsyth, Forsyth. It's called The Old Enemy. And it is a comparative study of the combat myth. Now, remember, we're dealing with this not from historical critical work in mythology. We're dealing with it in terms of the psychology of the archetypes. But what this man has done is, in my view, provided you with a wonderful study of the archetype of the sacred combat. Here it is right here. They just happen to have some copies of this. It's also very cheap, isn't it, Sid? I think it's, it doesn't say. They didn't put the price in it for you. Okay, it's on about $67.50. But it's worth it. If you really want to understand the archetypal dynamics behind the human struggle about evil. It's the best thing I've ever seen. And what we will do in just a minute is to go through some of this. But anyway, you've got to get a sense that in the psyche, the warrior aspect of the psyche, when it is functioning correctly, serves the king and the queen. There's your knighthood ideal. Now, what is the nature of the service? It is to defend cosmos, just order, a moral order, against the forces of chaos. That is what it's for. The warrior in the psyche, archetypally, in every culture, is to defend the just order, the moral order, against the forces of chaos. Now, you can see this a lot of ways archetypally, and if you study mandalas, what a mandala is an image of cosmos. And at the center, archetypally, is the two thrones of the conjunctio. Now, in patriarchal cultures, there's one throne. And in matriarchal cultures, there's one throne. In the human psyche, there are two thrones. And in the more primitive mythologies that you study, you see two thrones. In other words, in the deeper structures of the psyche, expressions in myth, you will always see two thrones, not one. You can see it in the ancient Egyptian mythology, and you see it in a lot of the extremely old mythologies. And they have different raps on that, but if you understand this stuff psychodynamically, you can see that this is the throne of the conjunctio, see, the two thrones. But it's always identified with a lot of archetypal imagery. You've got to study your Iliade to understand this. The axis mundi, the center of the world, the sacred tree. Who is the sacred tree? It's either the king or the queen or both, always. The cross of Christ, of course, is the sacred tree at the center of the cosmos. You must find the center of the axis mundi of the cosmos, or there will be chaos. Evil will triumph. See? Okay, so in the spatial portraits of the world that you see in the ancient world, it is always mandalic. Always. And if you study ancient cities, cities are images of cosmos. Polis is cosmos in microcosm. So if you study Memphis in ancient Egypt, or not Tennessee. That's right. You study. That's right. But if you some of the most interesting studies today are in geography, sacred geography in geography departments, and are studies in architecture and geography departments where they're studying the archetypal images of the city, because they're grounded right here on this. For our purposes, we have to see that the thing which impinges and threatens always is chaos from the outside of the cosmos. And you could even envision this as a sphere, and chaos comes from all directions. And it is the king and queen in their incarnation as warlords when they get up and go to defend the world against the forces of chaos. Now, in human history, that gets divided into social roles, and you get the knights who defend the king and the queen. But in fact, they are expressing an aspect of the great general himself or herself. The warlord who carries the fight to chaos. In other words, the king doesn't always sit on the throne. Sometimes they get up and button up with their armor and pick up the sword. Now you can see my favorite image of the queen in her warlord garb is Aliens 2, Sigourney Weaver, my heroine. And if you haven't seen Aliens 2, you got to see Aliens 2, because that is an image. I tell my female theologian friends, if you want to see an image of the God liberator in female form, Sigourney Weaver in Aliens 2. If you haven't seen it, you got to check that out. I always try to sell VCRs. I get a commission. Now, the combat myth is often portrayed like this. But you need to realize that these are the same images, just presented differently. Remember that the God, King, Queen, always, they are the center. And so wherever they are the center. So when you're representing this spatially, you've got a problem. But you need to recognize that this and this is really describing the same space. But here, our experience in the psyche, our experience of the enemy, if you've seen Sam Keene's book, Faces of the Enemy, we experience the enemy out there. In fact, the less developed we are in terms of psychodynamics, that's where we experience the enemy first. The more developed we are spiritually, and this is true of every human spiritual tradition of any depth, the first place you encounter the enemy is within. And only then do you turn to encountering the enemy without.